The election of 1824 would create a new party system, what was called the second party system. So the first party system had been between the Republicans and the Federalists. The Federalists as a party had collapsed in the aftermath of the War of 1812, which we talked about earlier this week, right? But the election of 1824, there would emerge a new two-party system. On the one hand, you would have what had been the Republican Party started by Jefferson, which had shifted over the course of the presidencies of Madison and Monroe toward being a party that was more in favor of a strong central government, or stronger central government, say, than Jefferson probably would have supported. And then sort of picking up the slack, picking up the tradition of what Jefferson's party had been, would be the Democrat Party, okay, which would be led and really created by Andrew Jackson, okay? So how did this two-party system come about? And of course, it's also tied into this question of the expansion of slavery, because the Democrat Party will be the party supporting the expansion of slavery and also sovereignty of states, right, over federal government, okay? The Whig Party will sort of provide a counterpoint to that, but more or less focusing on the issue of federal sovereignty over the states rather than on slavery, okay? But that slavery issue is sort of always under the surface there, okay? Especially the expansion of slavery. Now, in 1824, Monroe is on the way out, right? And his presidency, thanks to John Quincy Adams, right, the son of John and Abigail Adams, thanks to John Quincy Adams' work as the Secretary of State, the United States has expanded greatly in the presidency of Monroe. And you're now seeing the possibility for white settlers to live and settle in places from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean, right? And so Adams is really seeing himself as the logical successor of Monroe, right? And he is someone who is sort of basing his campaign on his experience as in foreign affairs and his accomplishments in foreign affairs and increasing the territory of the United States, okay? Now, he's joined also by four other candidates, okay? One of which we mentioned earlier in the week, Henry Clay of Kentucky, okay? And Henry Clay was someone who kind of characterized himself as the candidate from the West, and he had been someone who was calling out against Andrew Jackson's actions in Florida, and was warning that Andrew Jackson could be a Napoleon figure, someone that would use the military to seize power, okay? Now he's considering, he's trying to run for president as well. And another fellow, John C. Calhoun, who is from South Carolina, a strong pro-slavery Secretary of War under Madison, or under Monroe. But these three together, Adams, Calhoun, and Clay, are all people that support a strong Republican federal government that will be able to regulate finance through a national bank, that will be able to provide funds for the improvement of roads and bridges and canals, and really leading to a kind of investment in the infrastructure of this new country that will facilitate trade, and in which all the states, and especially the regions that are emerging, north, south, east, and west, these regions will be closely tied together by an interdependency on trade. So these three candidates together, Calhoun, Clay, and Adams, they all share a vision of a united republic, a nationalism that includes all the regions and that benefits all the regions, and that's tied together through trade, and the federal government being kind of the glue that ties it together in terms of building infrastructure and creating sound fiscal policies that promote business, okay? Now, on the other side are two candidates who are going to be favoring the sovereignty of the states, okay? And one of them is a fellow named Crawford, okay? And, he isn't super important for our purposes, but he's involved in this presidential race, okay? But the other one is going to be Andrew Jackson, and Andrew Jackson is kind of the political outsider in this race. And he is also someone, of course, who is really running on this platform of we're supporting the sovereignty of the states. We are supporting westward expansion and the acquisition of territory so that people can move west and take advantage of the opportunities out there. And again, this is very much in line with, say, Jefferson's vision for the country. And Jackson is someone who is very suspicious of the national bank, very suspicious of the regulation of credit. He sees that as something that's going to be used to be manipulated in such a way that as to benefit the merchants and the bankers at the expense of the ordinary farmer. So again, like Jefferson, he's suspicious of a national bank. And Jackson is running on a platform that's really saying, look, the insiders have ruined Washington, right? This is something we've all heard before, but it's a kind of populism, right? He's saying that really we need to entrust the country to the people, and the people have a kind of natural virtue in them as the landowners, as the farmers, and they're gonna we need to promote their interests, not the interests of the bankers in the cities, not the interests of the politicians. And he is the only candidate who does not have a substantive amount of political experience. He has served briefly as a senator from Tennessee since 1823 when he's running for president, but he's running on his military career. He's a war hero, and he's kind of this populist. And he's seen by Clay in particular as really a dangerous figure, a kind of a demagogue who might seize power because of his charisma and military background, okay? And Jackson is really taking advantage of a lot of discontent in the nation with the policies of the federal government, especially the fiscal policies. So in 1819, there had been a financial collapse, right, in the West as people were scrambling to move west and seize territory and buy territory from the federal government. The National Bank could not keep up with issuing or restraining the issuance of paper currency by private banks, okay? And so there was really no regulation. There was this availability of credit out in the West because the banks were just printing banknotes and loaning them out, and then for people to buy up land. And then ultimately this all collapses, and people are suffering in a recession after 1819, okay? And this is something that works to Jackson's advantage because there is discontent with how things have gone in the recent past, and he's going to use that to really carry this message of reform out to every region, right? And to say we need to rebuild the virtue of our republic and invest in that virtue being invested in the self-sufficient farmer. All right, now the other transition that's happening in this election, right, is that originally in the original Constitution, the president, of course, is chosen by electors, okay? And what's beginning to happen is that rather than those electors being chosen by the state legislatures, which is originally how it worked, many states are choosing to make the electors subject to or accountable to the people. And so the people vote for their electors, and the electors then vote for the president. So we're seeing now more or less the people being able to have a say in the presidential election. And in other cases, some states are allowing the electoral votes to be appointed or given to the presidential candidate based on the popular vote. Okay, so not every state is allowing a popular vote for the president, but some more. Okay, so we see this is now the people have more of a say in how the president's elected. All right, so that leads us up to the election itself of 1824, and you've got these. By then, Calhoun had dropped out of the race already, so you only had 4 candidates: Jackson, Adams, Clay, and Crawford, and no one wins a majority of the electoral votes. Jackson wins more than anyone else. He wins 99, okay, but not a majority, okay. So what happens in this case is that the House of Representatives gets to decide who the president is going to be, And John Quincy Adams has the second most electoral votes at 84, but he's substantially behind Jackson at 99. But he's very good at sort of playing the system, working the system, negotiating, because what's going to happen is he's got to convince enough congressmen to back him, and once he gets their support, then he'll be launched into the presidency, okay? And he's very good at using that to his advantage. And in particular, he kind of forms an alliance with Henry Clay against Jackson, okay? And, it makes sense that they would do this. They share a common vision for a united republic, and they have a kind of common vision for some nationalist policies about building up the infrastructure, and also taxing the imports of manufactured goods from Europe. So they share a lot in terms of their vision and their policy. And of course, Clay is very suspicious of Jackson. So he is one of the big backers of Adams, okay? And so Adams is able to get enough congressional support to be elected in the House of Representatives, and he becomes the president in February of 1825. He is inaugurated, and witnessing that event is his father, John Adams. Okay, there won't be another father to see his son inaugurated until George H.W. Bush witnessed his son's inauguration in 2001.